The champagne flute slipped from Tessa's hand, shattering against the marble floor of the reception hall. But she barely noticed because the man walking toward her through the crowd looked exactly like the groom she had just watched marry her best friend 20 minutes ago. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she blinked hard, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. But no, this man was different. Taller somehow, broader in the shoulders, his jaw sharper and his entire presence commanding in a way that made the crowded room seem to part naturally before him. He wore the same style tuxedo, had the same dark hair swept back from his forehead, but there was something about the way he moved that was distinctly his own. "You look like you have just seen a ghost," a warm voice said beside her, and Tessa turned to see her friend Mara grinning knowingly. "That's Graham Sullivan, the groom's older brother. He arrived late from Singapore, missed the ceremony entirely. Quite the entrance, right?" Tessa swallowed hard, forcing her racing pulse to slow. "I thought for a second that Marcus had developed a clone or something equally impossible." Mara laughed, the sound bright and musical against the backdrop of strings playing something classical and romantic. "Graham is the CEO of Sullivan Global Enterprises. Marcus always jokes that his brother lives on airplanes, hopping from one continent to another closing billion-dollar deals. Apparently, he almost did not make it at all, but he promised Marcus he would be here for the first dance." Before Tessa could respond, Graham Sullivan was standing directly in front of her, his gray eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Up close, he was even more striking than she had initially thought. There were fine lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of long hours and hard decisions, and a small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him look more real, more human despite the obvious wealth that clung to him like expensive cologne. "I apologize for startling you," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I saw you drop your glass. Are you hurt?" Tessa glanced down at her bare feet in their strappy silver heels, suddenly aware that she was standing dangerously close to scattered crystal. "I am fine, just clumsy and surprised." "You look remarkably like Marcus, so I have been told." Graham smiled, and it transformed his entire face from intimidating to approachable in an instant. "Though I am the significantly better-looking version, or so I tell him. I am Graham, the wayward older brother who cannot seem to master the concept of punctuality even for the most important day of his sibling's life. Tessa Clark. I am friends with Emily, the bride. We went to architecture school together." She extended her hand, and when his fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, she felt a jolt of electricity shoot straight up her arm. "Architecture," Graham said, not releasing her hand immediately. "That explains the way you were studying the ceiling moldings when I walked in." Tessa felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had not realized anyone had noticed her professional habit of analyzing every building she entered. "They are original plasterwork from the 19th century, remarkable craftsmanship. You do not see details like that anymore." "No, you do not." Graham finally released her hand, but his eyes never left hers. "Would you like to dance? I promised Marcus I would participate in at least one tradition today, and I believe the bride and groom are about to take the floor. Everyone else will join in shortly." The question caught her off guard. Well, yes, I suppose so." Music swelled as Emily and Marcus moved to the center of the polished wooden floor, her white dress floating around her like sea foam as Marcus held her with a tenderness that made Tessa's throat tighten. They looked so happy, so perfectly matched, that for a moment she felt the familiar ache of loneliness that had been her constant companion for the past 2 years, since her last relationship had imploded spectacularly. Then Graham's hand was at her elbow, gentle but assured, guiding her toward the dance floor as other couples began to join the newlyweds. Tessa found herself in his arms before she could overthink it, one of his hands resting lightly on her waist, while the other held hers with surprising gentleness for someone whose grip had felt so confident moments before. "I should warn you, I am not much of a dancer," Graham murmured as they began to move to the music. "I spend more time in boardrooms than ballrooms." "You are doing fine," Tessa said, and she meant it. He moved with an easy grace, his steps confident even if they were not technically perfect. "Better than fine, actually. Do not sound so surprised." There was laughter in his voice now, warm and genuine. "I did have to attend my share of formal events growing up. My mother insisted on dance lessons, said it was part of being a gentleman." They fell into a comfortable rhythm, swaying to the music as the room spun gently around them. Tessa was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, his hand on her waist, burning through the thin silk of her bridesmaid dress, her fingers resting on his shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric of his tuxedo. Their joined hands, palm to palm, creating a connection that felt far more intimate than a simple dance between strangers should feel. "So, architecture," Graham said after a moment. "What do you design? Homes, office buildings?" "Mainly residential projects right now. I work for Hartley and Associates downtown. We focus on sustainable design, trying to create spaces that are beautiful but also environmentally responsible. It is challenging work, trying to balance aesthetics with function and ecological impact, but I love it." "That sounds incredibly fulfilling," Graham said, and something in his tone made her believe he genuinely meant it. "Creating something lasting, something that will shelter people and stand for generations. There is nobility in that." Tessa found herself smiling despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "What about you? Mara said you run Sullivan Global Enterprises. What exactly does that entail when you are not flying around the world closing deals?" Graham's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "We are an investment firm specializing in international development projects. Infrastructure, mainly. Roads, bridges, utility systems in developing markets. We find opportunities, secure funding, manage construction, then hand over completed projects to local governments. It is complicated and often frustrating work, but like you said about your architecture, it feels meaningful. Building things that improve people's lives." "That does sound complicated," Tessa agreed, "and it must be exhausting, all that travel." "It is," Graham admitted. "I cannot remember the last time I spent more than a week in one place. My apartment in New York is essentially a hotel room I happen to own. Sometimes I wake up and have to look at my phone to remember what city I am in." There was something almost melancholy in his words, a loneliness that Tessa recognized because she had felt it herself in the quiet moments of her own life. The song was ending, transitioning into something more upbeat, but neither of them moved to separate. Instead, Graham pulled her slightly closer, adjusting his hold on her waist. "Would you think it forward of me to ask for another dance?" he asked quietly. "I would think it forward not to," Tessa replied, surprising herself with her boldness. They danced through 3 more songs, conversation flowing easily between them. Graham told her about growing up in Connecticut, the youngest son of a father who had built his construction company from nothing and expected his boys to understand the value of hard work. Tessa shared stories about her childhood in Vermont, the daughter of 2 teachers who had encouraged her creativity and supported her dream of becoming an architect, even when it meant expensive college tuition and uncertain job prospects. "Marcus and I used to spend summers working on my father's construction sites," Graham said as they swayed to a particularly slow ballad. He hated it, could not wait to escape to college and pursue law, but I loved it. Loved seeing concrete and steel and glass transform into something functional and beautiful. That is why I ended up doing what I do now. I still get to build things, just on a much larger scale. Emily told me Marcus is with Brennan and Associates, Tessa said. Corporate law. She jokes that she married the most boring type of lawyer possible. Graham laughed, the sound rich and warm. He is good at it, though. Detail-oriented, patient, willing to read thousands of pages of contracts without losing his mind. I call him when I need legal advice because I know he will catch things other attorneys miss. You two are close, then. Very. Despite the age gap. I am 33 and Marcus is 28. When he was born, I was already in kindergarten, so growing up we were not as connected as we might have been otherwise. But as adults, we have become genuine friends. He is one of the few people I trust completely. Tessa felt Graham's thumb moving in small circles on her waist, probably unconsciously, but the gesture sent pleasant shivers down her spine. She was 26, recently promoted to junior partner at her firm, and she had not felt this kind of instant connection with anyone in longer than she cared to admit. There was something about Graham that made her want to keep talking, to share pieces of herself she normally kept guarded. I moved to the city 4 years ago, she found herself saying. Left everything I knew in Vermont to pursue this career. Some days it feels like the best decision I ever made. Other days I wonder if I am just fooling myself, trying to make something happen that was never meant to be. What makes you feel that way? Graham asked, his gray eyes searching hers. The usual things. Doubt. Comparison. Seeing colleagues advance faster, win bigger projects, wondering if I am talented enough or just adequate. My last relationship ended partly because of my work. He said I cared more about blueprints than about him, and maybe he was right. I get consumed by my projects, lose track of time and everything else. That is not a flaw, Graham said firmly. That is passion. Anyone who tried to make you feel guilty for caring about your work was not the right person for you. The certainty in his voice made Tessa's chest tighten. You sound very sure about that. I am. I have spent enough years in business to recognize that the people who truly excel are the ones who care deeply about what they do. The ones who get lost in their work because it matters to them. That is not something to apologize for. That is something to celebrate. The song ended, and the bandleader announced that dinner would be served shortly. Guests began drifting toward the elaborately decorated tables, but Graham kept his hand on Tessa's waist, as if reluctant to let her go. I should probably find my seat, Tessa said, though she made no move to step away. Where are you sitting? Table 7, the bridesmaid table. I am at table 3 with family. Graham paused, then added, but I would much rather continue this conversation. Would you think me terribly rude if I asked to switch place cards with someone? Tessa felt herself smile. I would think you were very determined. I am when something matters to me. The weight of his gaze made her pulse skip. Give me 5 minutes. He disappeared into the crowd, moving with purpose, and Tessa found herself standing alone on the edge of the dance floor, trying to process what had just happened. She had come to this wedding expecting to smile through the ceremony, give a toast during dinner, and dance with the other bridesmaids before going home to her empty apartment and her waiting sketchpad. She had not expected to meet someone like Graham Sullivan. Had not expected to feel this immediate pull toward a man she had just met. He is gorgeous. Mara appeared at her elbow again, practically vibrating with excitement. And he spent the last 4 songs dancing only with you. Do you know how many women in this room would kill for Graham Sullivan's attention? Stop, Tessa said, though she could not help laughing. It was just dancing. That was not just dancing, that was eye contact that could melt steel. He is into you, Tessa, seriously into you. Before Tessa could respond, Graham was back, looking slightly triumphant. Consider the seating arrangements amended. Shall we? He offered his arm and Tessa took it, aware of Mara's delighted grin behind them. Graham led her to table 7, where someone had indeed moved the place cards around. Now his name was beside hers, and across from them sat 2 of Emily's cousins who looked thrilled by this development. Dinner was a blur of courses. Arugula salad with candied pecans, butter-poached lobster, herb-crusted lamb with rosemary potatoes. The food was exquisite, but Tessa barely tasted any of it because she was too focused on her conversation with Graham. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering unexpected connections and shared interests. They both loved old movies, particularly film noir from the 40s and 50s. They both preferred mountains to beaches. They both had a weakness for good coffee and bad puns. "I have a confession," Graham said as dessert was being served, some elaborate chocolate creation that looked almost too beautiful to eat. "I do not actually like chocolate cake. Never have." Tessa gasped in mock horror. "That is possibly the most controversial thing you have said all evening. How can you not like chocolate cake? I know I am a monster." He grinned, pushing his plate toward her. "You should eat mine, I insist. I cannot eat 2 pieces of cake. Why not?" "It is a wedding. Calories do not count at weddings. I am fairly certain that is a scientifically proven fact." Tessa laughed, accepting the plate. The chocolate was rich and decadent, and she closed her eyes briefly to savor it. When she opened them again, Graham was watching her with an expression that made her heart flutter. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. You just look happy. It is nice to see." The evening continued with toasts and more dancing. Emily's father gave a speech that made everyone tear up, talking about watching his daughter grow from a determined little girl who built elaborate structures with blocks into a brilliant architect who now designed real buildings. Marcus's mother welcomed Emily into their family with such warmth that even the waitstaff stopped to listen. And then Marcus himself stood, holding Emily's hand, and spoke about finding the love of his life when he least expected it. "I was not looking for a relationship," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "I was focused on my career, convinced I did not have time for romance." And then Emily walked into that coffee shop, arguing with the barista about whether a flat white was really any different from a latte, and I was lost. Sometimes the best things in life happen when you stop planning and just let yourself feel. Tessa glanced at Graham and found him already looking at her. Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them, and then the room erupted in applause and the spell broke. "Come outside with me," Graham said quietly, leaning close so only she could hear. "Just for a few minutes. I need some air." They slipped out through the French doors onto the terrace overlooking the gardens. The night was warm and clear, stars visible despite the ambient light from the city below. The sounds of the reception faded to a distant hum, leaving them in a bubble of relative quiet. "This is better," Graham said, loosening his bow tie. "I love Marcus, but crowds are exhausting." "I know what you mean," Tessa agreed, leaning against the stone balustrade. "Everyone wants to talk, to catch up, to be heard. Sometimes you just need silence." "Exactly." Graham moved to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "Thank you for making tonight bearable. I have been dreading this event for weeks. Dreading your own brother's wedding." "Not the wedding itself. The questions. The well-meaning relatives asking why I am still single when I am going to settle down, whether I have met anyone special. As if being 33 and unmarried is some kind of character flaw that needs to be fixed." Tessa nodded in understanding. I get the same thing. My mother calls every Sunday to ask if I am dating anyone. She worries I am too focused on work, that I will wake up one day and realize I am alone, as if I do not already know that. Are you? Alone, I mean. The question was gentle, but there was something beneath it, a hope that made Tessa's breath catch. Yes. By choice, mostly. After my last relationship ended, I decided to focus on myself, on my career. Dating felt like too much effort, too much risk of getting hurt again. I understand that, Graham said quietly. I have not had a serious relationship in 5 years, not since Caroline. She gave me an ultimatum, choose her or choose my career. I chose my career and she married someone else within a year. Sometimes I wonder if I made the wrong choice. Did you love her? I thought I did at the time. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of her more than the actual person. She was beautiful and successful and the kind of woman my mother approved of. But we did not really know each other, not deeply. We never talked the way you and I have been talking tonight. Tessa's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. We only just met. I know. And I am probably being ridiculous, reading too much into one evening. But I have been all over the world, met thousands of people, and I have never felt this kind of immediate connection with anyone. Have you? She could lie, protect herself from potential disappointment, or she could be brave and tell him the truth. No, she admitted. I have not. Graham turned to face her fully, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was feather light, but it sent electricity racing across her skin. I leave for Shanghai on Monday. I will be gone for at least 3 weeks, maybe longer. But when I get back, I would very much like to take you to dinner. A real date, not a chance meeting at a wedding, but an intentional choice to spend time together. Would you be interested in that? Yes, Tessa said without hesitation. I would be very interested in that. He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Good. That is very good. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number. I will text you so you have mine. They exchanged information, and then Graham did something that surprised her. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. It was an old-fashioned gesture, almost courtly, and it made her feel cherished in a way that took her breath away. We should probably get back inside, he said reluctantly, before they send a search party. They returned to the reception just as the cake was being cut. Emily caught Tessa's eye from across the room and gave her a questioning thumbs up. Tessa nodded, feeling heat rise in her cheeks, and Emily's delighted grin told her that explanations would be required later. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant haze. Tessa danced with Emily's father, with Marcus's uncle, with several of the groomsmen. But her awareness always circled back to Graham, tracking his movements as he fulfilled his family obligations, posing for photos and chatting with relatives. Every so often their eyes would meet across the crowded room, and each time Tessa felt that same jolt of connection, that same sense of rightness that defied logic. As midnight approached and guests began to leave, Tessa found herself standing by the coat check, searching for her wrap. Graham appeared beside her, holding his own jacket. "Can I give you a ride home?" he asked. "I have a car waiting." "That is very kind, but I do not want to take you out of your way." "You would not be. And honestly, I am not ready to say goodbye yet. Indulge me a few more minutes of your company." How could she refuse that? They said their goodbyes to Emily and Marcus, who were too wrapped up in each other to do more than wave distractedly. Outside, a sleek black car was indeed waiting, and a driver in a crisp suit opened the door for them. The interior was all leather and polished wood, more luxurious than anything Tessa had ever experienced. As they pulled away from the venue, Graham settled back against the seat with a sigh. "Thank you for tonight," he said. You turned what I expected to be an ordeal into something I will actually remember fondly. It was just dancing and conversation. It was more than that, and you know it." His voice was soft but certain. "This matters, Tessa. Whatever this is between us, it matters. I do not want to let it slip away because of bad timing or fear or any of the other excuses we could make." Tessa looked at him. At this man she had met only hours ago but who somehow felt familiar, like someone she had known in another life and was only now rediscovering. "I do not want that either." "Good." He reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Then we will figure it out. The distance, the schedules, all of it. We will figure it out." The drive to Tessa's apartment in the West Village took only 20 minutes. When they pulled up outside her building, Graham walked her to the door despite her protests that it was not necessary. "I was raised to be a gentleman," he said. "My mother would disown me if she knew I let you walk to your door alone." They stood in the small lobby, neither quite ready to part. Graham still held her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "I am going to text you tomorrow," he warned, "and probably the day after that. I am terrible at playing it cool when I actually care about something." "I am glad," Tessa said. "I do not want games. I get enough of that at work, navigating office politics and client demands. With you, I just want honesty." "Then that is what you will get, always." He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle and brief but full of promise. "Good night, Tessa Clark. Thank you for dancing with me." "Good night, Graham Sullivan. Thank you for asking." She watched him walk back to the car, watched him turn and wave before sliding into the back seat. The car pulled away, taillights disappearing around the corner, and only then did Tessa head upstairs to her apartment. She felt like she was floating, like her feet barely touched the ground. Inside, she kicked off her heels and collapsed onto her couch, pulling out her phone. There was already a text from Graham. "Thank you again for tonight. I know I already said it, but it bears repeating. Sleep well." Tessa smiled, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. "You too. Safe travels to Shanghai. Come back soon." His response was immediate. "I will. Count on it." The next morning, Tessa woke to find 3 more messages from Graham. The first was a photo of a sunrise, deep oranges and pinks streaking across the sky. Below it, he had written, "Morning view from my apartment. Not as beautiful as last night, but close." The second message was more practical. "What is your favorite coffee? I am planning ahead for when I take you to dinner. Want to make sure I get it right." And the third, "I cannot stop thinking about you. Is that strange to say after one evening? If it is, feel free to ignore this message and pretend I am normal." Tessa laughed, her heart feeling impossibly light as she typed back, "Not strange. I have been thinking about you too. And my favorite coffee is a vanilla oat milk latte if we are being specific." She spent Sunday working on sketches for a new project, a sustainable housing development that her firm was pitching to a nonprofit organization. But every hour or so, her phone would buzz with a new message from Graham. Sometimes it was a photo from his apartment, his absurdly well-stocked bookshelf, the view from his window, his espresso machine that looked complicated enough to require an engineering degree. Sometimes it was just a thought or observation that he wanted to share. He told her about the article he was reading on renewable energy infrastructure. She sent him photos of her sketches, explaining the principles of passive solar design. They traded stories about their worst travel experiences. His luggage getting lost in Jakarta, her getting stuck in a snowstorm in Buffalo during a site visit. The conversation flowed as easily over text as it had in person, and Tessa found herself checking her phone constantly, eager for his next message. By Monday morning, Tessa had to force herself to focus on work. She had meetings scheduled with clients, presentations to prepare, 100 details that required her full attention. But part of her mind was always tracking the time, calculating what hour it was in Shanghai, wondering what Graham was doing. He texted her from the airport, boarding soon. Going to be offline for about 15 hours, but I will message you when I land. Miss you already. Miss you too, she replied. Safe flight. The silence that followed was strange. Tessa had not realized how much she had come to rely on those frequent little messages, those reminders that someone was thinking about her. She threw herself into work, meeting with the nonprofit's board of directors to present her housing designs. They loved her ideas, asked thoughtful questions, and by the end of the meeting she felt cautiously optimistic about their chances of winning the contract. When Graham's message finally came through early Tuesday morning, she was still half asleep. Made it to Shanghai. Hotel is nice but impersonal. Wish you were here to make it interesting. She smiled at her phone screen, typing back. How was the flight? Long. Watched 3 movies and still had hours to kill. Thought about you the whole time. Over the next 2 weeks they fell into a pattern. Graham would message her in the mornings, which were his evenings given the time difference. They would text throughout the day, their conversation interrupted by meetings and work commitments, but always resuming. And then at night, her night and his morning, they would sometimes video call, seeing each other's faces on small screens and wishing the distance between them was not so vast. Tell me about your day, Graham said during one such call, his image slightly pixelated but still handsome. He was wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and Tessa could see the corner of a hotel room behind him. Productive, actually, Tessa said, curled up on her couch in pajamas. We got approval for the housing project. Construction starts in the spring. It is going to be beautiful, Graham. 60 units of affordable housing designed to passive house standards. Solar panels, geothermal heating, rainwater collection. Everything I have been working toward. That is incredible, Graham said, and the pride in his voice made her chest warm. You should be so proud of yourself. I am. Terrified but proud. What about you? How are your meetings going? Exhausting, he admitted. We are trying to finalize a water treatment facility project, but there are complications with local permits and environmental assessments. Nothing we cannot work through, but it is slow going. I have been in conference rooms for 12 hours a day. That sounds brutal. It is. But talking to you makes it better. You are the best part of my day, Tessa. Every day. She felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the fact that he was thousands of miles away. You are the best part of mine, too. I was thinking, Graham said, his tone shifting to something more serious. What if I fly you out here for a weekend? I know it is a long trip, but I really want to see you. Not just on a screen, in person. Tessa's heart leaped at the suggestion, but practical concerns immediately surfaced. Graham, that is an incredibly expensive flight, and I have work commitments. I will cover the ticket, obviously, and it would just be a weekend, Friday to Monday. You would not miss much work. Please think about it. I miss you. The longing in his voice nearly undid her. She missed him too, more than she had thought possible given they had only spent one evening together in person. But that evening had been enough to show her that what they had was special, worth pursuing even when logic said it was too soon, too complicated. Let me check my schedule, she said, and talk to my boss about taking a personal day. Is that a yes? It is a maybe, leaning strongly toward yes. Graham's smile was brilliant even through the slightly grainy video. I will take those odds. 3 days later, Tessa found herself on a plane to Shanghai, courtesy of a first-class ticket that Graham had insisted on booking. She had never flown internationally for anything other than work, had certainly never flown first class. The seat was like a small pod, completely private, with a bed that actually lay flat. The flight attendants brought her champagne and warm nuts, and a menu with more options than some restaurants she had been to. It all felt surreal, like she had stumbled into someone else's life. But when the plane touched down in Shanghai, and she made her way through customs and out into the arrivals hall, and she saw Graham waiting for her with flowers and a smile that lit up his entire face, it all suddenly felt very real and very right. "You came," he said, pulling her into a hug that felt like coming home. "Of course I came," Tessa said, breathing in the scent of him, letting herself relax into his embrace. "I missed you. I missed you too, so much." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. "Is it crazy that I want to kiss you right now in the middle of this airport, surrounded by strangers?" "Probably," Tessa said, her heart racing. "But I want you to anyway." So he did. His lips met hers softly at first, tentative, asking permission. And then she was kissing him back, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something that made her forget where they were, forget everything except the feeling of being held by him, wanted by him, cherished by him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "Worth the wait," he murmured. "Definitely worth the wait." He drove her to his hotel, a towering glass building in the financial district with views that seemed to stretch forever. His suite was enormous, all sleek modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. There was a separate bedroom, and Graham was quick to point that out. "I booked a room for you on a different floor," he said. "I want you to be comfortable. No pressure, no expectations. I just wanted to see you." "Thank you," Tessa said, touched by his consideration. "Though I have to say this is all a bit overwhelming. The flight, the hotel, the entire gesture. I am not used to this." "Used to what?" "Grand gestures. Extravagance. I grew up in a town where going out to dinner meant the local diner. This is all very new to me." Graham took her hands, his expression earnest. "I do not want you to feel uncomfortable. The money, the travel, it is just logistics to me. What matters is spending time with you. If you would rather we skip the fancy restaurants and order takeout in sweats, that is fine with me. I just want to be with you." And he meant it. Over that weekend, they did some tourist activities. Walked along the Bund, visited a traditional tea house, explored the French concession with its tree-lined streets and Art Deco architecture that made Tessa's professional heart sing. But the moments she treasured most were the quiet ones. Sitting on the balcony of Graham's suite, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the city. Ordering room service and eating dumplings while Graham told her stories about his travels. Falling asleep on his couch while watching a movie. Waking to find herself covered with a blanket and Graham watching her with such tenderness that it made her chest ache. "I could get used to this," she admitted on Sunday evening as they sat on that balcony again, the city lights sparkling below them like fallen stars. "I hope you do," Graham said. "Because I am not letting you go, Tessa Clark. I know it has only been a few weeks, and I know this whole situation is complicated and probably terrifying. But I am falling for you. Have been since the moment you dropped that champagne glass and looked at me like I was a ghost." Tessa's breath caught. She had been feeling the same thing, had been afraid to name it because naming it made it real and real things could hurt you. But looking at Graham now, at the honesty and vulnerability in his eyes, she found her courage. "I am falling for you too," she said. "And you are right, it is terrifying. But it is also the best thing that has happened to me in a very long time." He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. And later, when they said goodnight at the door to her hotel room, neither of them wanted to separate. But Graham was true to his word about no pressure, so he simply held her for a long moment before reluctantly letting her go. "Tomorrow I have meetings all day," he said. "But my flight back to New York is Wednesday evening. I was thinking we could travel together, make it an adventure." "I would like that," Tessa said. "I would like that very much." The flight home was a gift of uninterrupted time together. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Graham told her about the pressure of running a company, of being responsible for hundreds of employees and million-dollar projects. Tessa shared her anxiety about proving herself in a male-dominated field, about wanting to create work that mattered but worrying she was not talented enough. "You are brilliant," Graham said firmly. "I have seen your designs, heard you talk about your work. You have vision and passion and skill. Do not let anyone make you doubt that, especially not yourself." "How are you so sure?" "Because I have spent my entire adult life evaluating talent, identifying people who have what it takes to succeed. And you have it, Tessa. You absolutely have it." They landed in New York on Thursday morning, exhausted but happy. Graham insisted on dropping Tessa at her apartment before heading to his own. "When can I see you again?" he asked as they stood outside her building, neither ready to part. "I do not know. When is your next trip?" "Not until next month, thank God." "I am staying in New York for at least 3 weeks, which means I intend to spend as much of that time as possible with you if you will let me." "I will let you," Tessa said, smiling. "In fact, I insist on it." They fell into a relationship so naturally that it sometimes felt like they had been together for years rather than weeks. Graham would show up at Tessa's office with coffee, and they would steal lunch hours together, exploring restaurants in neighborhoods neither of them knew well. Tessa would go to Graham's apartment after work, and they would cook dinner together, discovering that they were both terrible at following recipes, but somehow made it work anyway. He introduced her to Marcus and Emily, who immediately loved her. "I knew you two would hit it off," Emily said smugly over dinner at a cozy Italian place in Brooklyn. "From the moment I saw you dancing at the wedding, I knew." Graham's friends from business school welcomed Tessa warmly, including her in their monthly poker games, despite her complete inability to bluff. Tessa's colleagues at the architecture firm were fascinated by Graham, peppering him with questions about his international projects whenever he stopped by the office. And through it all, Tessa found herself falling deeper in love with him. It was there in the small things. The way he always made sure she ate breakfast, knowing she had a tendency to skip it when stressed about work. The way he remembered details of stories she told him, following up days later to ask how a particular meeting went or whether she had heard back from a client. The way he looked at her, like she was the most important person in his world. But it was also there in the bigger things. When Tessa had a crisis at work, a project that was going wrong with a contractor who was not following her specifications, Graham flew into action. He made calls, leveraged his connections in the construction industry, and had the situation resolved within 48 hours. When she worried that he had overstepped, he was quick to reassure her. "I did not do your job," he said. "I just made sure the right people heard your concerns. You are the one who identified the problem and proposed the solutions. I just cleared away some obstacles so you could do what you do best." 2 months into their relationship, Graham invited Tessa to spend the weekend at his family's house in Connecticut. She was nervous about meeting his mother, but Graham assured her it would be fine. "She is going to love you," he said as they drove north on Friday evening. "Marcus already told her you are brilliant and kind and far too good for me." Marcus said that. Marcus says that to anyone who will listen. He thinks I should lock you down before you realize you can do better. Tessa laughed. "I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me." "Good. That is exactly what I want to hear." Graham's mother, Margaret Sullivan, was a force of nature, whip-smart, effortlessly elegant, and possessed of a dry sense of humor that reminded Tessa immediately of Graham. She welcomed Tessa with genuine warmth, giving her a tour of the rambling old house that had been in the Sullivan family for 3 generations. "Graham tells me you are an architect," Margaret said as they walked through the garden. "What do you think of this old place?" "Be honest, I can handle criticism." Tessa studied the house with a professional eye, the graceful colonial lines, the way it sat naturally in the landscape, the large windows that must fill the rooms with light. "I think it is beautiful," she said honestly. "The proportions are perfect, and whoever designed it understood how to create flow between indoor and outdoor spaces. It must be wonderful in the summer." "It is," Margaret agreed. "Graham's father proposed to me in this garden, right there, under that oak tree. It was 50 years ago, but I remember it like yesterday." "50 years," Tessa said softly. "That is remarkable." "It is it not? We had our struggles, of course. Running a business, raising 2 boys, navigating all the challenges life throws at you, but we were partners in the truest sense. He was my best friend." Her voice held sadness, and Tessa remembered Graham mentioning that his father had passed away 3 years ago. "I am sorry for your loss," Tessa said. "Thank you, dear, but I am also grateful for the years we had." "When you find the right person, you hold on tight and do not let go." Margaret gave Tessa a meaningful look. "Graham has not brought anyone to meet me in 5 years, not since Caroline, and we all knew that was not going to work out. The fact that he brought you here tells me everything I need to know about how serious he is." "I am serious about him too," Tessa admitted. "I know it is fast, but it feels right." "Then that is all that matters. Trust your instincts, Tessa. They will rarely steer you wrong." That evening, the 4 of them had dinner together. Tessa, Graham, Margaret, and Marcus and Emily, who had driven up from the city. The meal was filled with laughter and good-natured teasing, stories about Graham and Marcus as children that made Tessa wish she had known them then. She could picture Graham as a serious little boy, probably organizing his toys by size and color, making plans even at age 5. After dinner, Graham pulled her outside onto the porch. The night was cool, and he wrapped his jacket around her shoulders before pulling her close. "Thank you for coming this weekend," he said. "I know meeting family can be intense." "Your family is wonderful," Tessa said. "Your mother is incredible. She told me about your father, about their partnership. It sounds like they had something really special." "They did. He was my hero growing up. Worked his way up from nothing, built a successful company through sheer determination and integrity. I have tried to live up to his example, but some days I am not sure I succeed." "He would be proud of you," Tessa said with certainty. "Your mother is proud of you." "Everyone who knows you is proud of you, Graham. What about you? Are you proud of me?" "So proud," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "And grateful that you walked toward me at that wedding. Grateful for every moment we have had since." He kissed her then, tender and sweet, and Tessa felt a sense of contentment settle over her that she had never experienced before. This was what she had been waiting for without knowing it. This man, this feeling, this sense of being exactly where she was supposed to be. 3 months became 6 months, and their relationship only deepened. They navigated Graham's travel schedule, using video calls and constant messages to stay connected when he was overseas. Tessa flew to meet him twice more, once in London, where they spent a magical weekend exploring museums and historic neighborhoods, and once in Dubai, where the modern architecture made her head spin with inspiration. But more importantly, they were building a life together in New York. Tessa started keeping clothes at Graham's apartment, then more clothes, until one day Graham opened his closet and laughed. I think you live here now, he said. Officially. Is that okay? Tessa asked, suddenly uncertain. It is more than okay. I love coming home to you. Love knowing you will be here when I get back from trips. Actually, I have been thinking about something. He pulled her to sit beside him on the couch. Your lease is up next month, right? Yes, and my landlord is raising the rent by an absurd amount. I have been meaning to start looking for a new place, but I have been too busy. Move in with me, officially. Make this your home too. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. She had been thinking about this, hoping for it, but hearing him actually say the words made it real. Are you sure? That is a big step. I am completely sure. I love you, Tessa. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want this to be our place, not just mine that you visit sometimes. What do you say? I say yes, Tessa said, feeling tears prick her eyes. I love you too, Graham. So much. Moving in together was both wonderful and challenging. They had to navigate the small conflicts that arise when two independent people merge their lives. Graham's neat freak tendencies versus Tessa's habit of leaving sketchbooks everywhere. His love of mornings versus her preference for staying up late. His bland taste in food versus her adventurous palate. But they worked through each issue with humor and compromise, learning each other's rhythms and quirks. Tessa transformed one of Graham's spare rooms into a home office, setting up her drafting table and filling the shelves with architecture books. Graham surprised her by commissioning custom lighting designed specifically for her drawing work. She planted herbs in containers on the balcony, bringing life and color to the previously sterile space. He started keeping her favorite tea stocked in the kitchen, along with the specific brand of dark chocolate she loved. One evening, about 8 months after they had met, Tessa came home from work to find the apartment filled with candles and the smell of something delicious cooking. "What is all this?" she asked, setting down her bag. "This," Graham said, appearing from the kitchen with a slightly sheepish smile, "is my attempt at cooking you a romantic dinner. Fair warning, it might be terrible. I tried to make coq au vin, but I am not entirely sure I did it right." Tessa's heart melted. Graham was not a confident cook, which made this gesture all the more meaningful. "It smells amazing. What is the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to want to do something special for the woman I love?" "No, but you look nervous. What is going on?" Graham took her hands, suddenly serious. "I have been doing a lot of thinking lately, about my work, about the constant travel, about what I want my life to look like. And I realized that as much as I love my company, I love you more. I do not want to keep spending half my life on airplanes, half a world away from you. Graham, I would never ask you to give up your career. I know you would not, but I am asking myself if there is a better way. So I have been talking to Marcus and my board of directors about transitioning to a different role. Less operational, more strategic. I would still be CEO, but I would travel maybe once a month instead of every week. Spend most of my time here in New York where you are, where we are." Tessa felt tears welling up. "You would do that? Really?" "I have been thinking about it for months. The company is stable, we have excellent people in place in every region. I do not need to micromanage every project anymore. And honestly, I am tired, Tessa. Tired of hotel rooms and airport lounges. I want a real life. With you." She kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "There is one more thing," he said softly. "And you can absolutely say no, or say it is too soon, or say you need time to think. But I have to tell you how I feel." He stepped back and, to Tessa's shock, dropped to one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Tessa Clark, I knew from the moment I saw you at Marcus's wedding that you were going to change my life. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have made me want things I did not know I wanted. A home, a real partnership, a future that is about more than just the next deal or the next project. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a ring that took her breath away. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique and absolutely perfect. Yes, Tessa said, tears streaming down her face now. Yes, of course I will marry you. Graham slid the ring onto her finger, and then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a joy that matched her own. They stood there in the candle-lit living room, holding each other, laughing and crying and feeling like the luckiest people alive. I cannot believe this is real, Tessa said when she could finally speak. I feel like I am living in a dream. If this is a dream, I never want to wake up. Graham cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Tessa. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that. They called their families that night, sharing the news with people who were thrilled but not at all surprised. I knew he was going to propose, Emily said gleefully. Marcus told me he was planning it. I am so happy for you both. Margaret cried happy tears and immediately started talking about wedding plans, offering the family house for the ceremony if they wanted it. Tessa's parents, calling from Vermont via video chat, were overjoyed and could not wait to meet Graham in person. Over the next 6 months, they planned their wedding together, making decisions that reflected both of their personalities. The ceremony would be at the Sullivan House in Connecticut in October, when the leaves would be turning brilliant colors. It would be small and intimate, just family and close friends. Emily agreed to be Tessa's maid of honor, and Marcus was Graham's best man, which felt perfectly right. But before the wedding, there were other milestones to celebrate. Tessa's housing project was completed, and the dedication ceremony was one of the proudest moments of her career. Graham stood beside her, beaming with pride, as local officials praised her innovative design and commitment to sustainability. The project won 2 prestigious awards, and Tessa was promoted to senior partner at her firm. Graham's transition to a less travel-intensive role went smoothly. He worked from the New York office most days, traveling only for the most critical meetings. The change transformed him. He seemed more relaxed, more present, more content. They developed routines together, morning runs along the Hudson River, cooking dinner side by side, weekend trips to explore different parts of the Northeast. Their wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the October sky a brilliant blue. Tessa stood in one of the bedrooms of the Sullivan house, Emily fussing with the delicate lace of her dress while her mother dabbed at tears, and Margaret offered sage advice about marriage. "Remember to pick your battles," Margaret said. "Some things are worth fighting for, and some things just do not matter in the grand scheme of things. Learn to tell the difference. And remember to laugh," Tessa's mother added. "Life will throw challenges at you, but if you can laugh together, you can get through anything." Tessa looked at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the radiant woman staring back at her. Her dress was simple but elegant, fitting her perfectly. The sapphire engagement ring sparkled on her finger, soon to be joined by a wedding band. And in a few minutes, she would walk downstairs and marry the man who had transformed her entire world with a single dance. The ceremony took place in the garden under that same oak tree where Graham's father had proposed to Margaret decades before. Tessa walked down an aisle lined with white flowers, her father beside her, toward where Graham waited. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that made her breath catch. Pure love, pure joy, pure certainty. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Graham promised to support her dreams, to be her partner in every sense, to love her through whatever challenges life brought. Tessa promised to believe in him, to build a home with him, to choose him every single day for the rest of her life. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Graham kissed her to applause and cheers from their gathered loved ones. And as they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Tessa felt a completeness she had never known before. This was what happiness looked like. This was what love felt like. This was everything she had ever wanted and had not known to dream of. The reception was exactly what they had hoped for, warm and joyful and intimate. They had their first dance to the same song that had been playing when they met at Marcus and Emily's wedding, and Tessa laughed when Graham pulled her close. "Remember when you thought I was Marcus's clone?" he murmured in her ear. "I was in shock," she defended. "You look remarkably similar from a distance. Only from a distance. Up close, I am clearly much more handsome." "Obviously," Tessa agreed, kissing him. They danced with family and friends, ate amazing food, and celebrated late into the night. But Tessa's favorite moment came just before midnight when she and Graham snuck away from the party to walk through the garden alone. "Happy?" Graham asked, pulling her close as they stood under the stars. "Incredibly," Tessa said. "This day has been perfect. You are perfect." "I am far from perfect, but I am perfect for you. That is all that matters." They stood there in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A chance encounter at a wedding, a dance that had turned into conversation, conversation that had turned into connection. Neither of them had been looking for love that night, but they had found it anyway. "What are you thinking about?" Graham asked after a moment. "About how life surprises you," Tessa said. "About how the best things happen when you least expect them. I went to that wedding thinking I would just support Emily and maybe catch up with old friends. I never imagined I would meet you." "I almost did not come," Graham admitted. "I was in Tokyo, and I thought about sending Marcus some expensive gift instead and claiming I could not get away. But something made me book that ticket, made me get on that plane. I guess fate knew what it was doing." "Fate and Emily," Tessa laughed. "She told me later that she had been plotting to introduce us for months, but the timing never worked out. She was thrilled that we found each other on our own. Remind me to thank her again for that." They returned to the reception hand in hand, joining their guests for the last dances of the night. And when the party finally ended and everyone had said their goodbyes, Graham carried Tessa over the threshold of the guest house where they would spend their wedding night. "I love you, Mrs. Sullivan," he said, setting her down gently. "I love you too," Tessa replied, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Thank you for asking me to dance. Thank you for saying yes to everything." They spent their honeymoon in Italy, exploring ancient architecture and eating their way through Tuscany. Tessa sketched constantly, inspired by the buildings and landscapes, while Graham read novels and learned to truly relax. They talked about their future, the children they hoped to have, the projects they wanted to tackle both individually and together, the life they were building. 2 years after their wedding, Tessa gave birth to their daughter, Grace. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination, and she completed their family in a way neither of them had quite anticipated. Graham proved to be a devoted father, cutting back his work hours even more to be present for every milestone. When Grace was 3, they had a son, Henry, who was quieter than his sister but equally beloved. Tessa moved to working 4 days a week, finding a balance between her career and her family that felt right. Graham surprised her on their 5th anniversary by starting a foundation focused on sustainable housing development, combining their shared passion for building things that would improve people's lives. They bought a house in Brooklyn with a garden where the kids could play and enough room for Tessa's home office. Graham joked that he had become thoroughly domesticated, but he had never been happier. The constant travel, the hotel rooms, the relentless pace of his old life all seemed like distant memories now. 10 years after that first dance at Marcus and Emily's wedding, Tessa found herself at another wedding, this time for one of Graham's cousins. She stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching Graham dance with grace while Henry clung to her leg, too shy to join them. "They look happy," Emily said, appearing beside her with her own children in tow. She and Marcus now had 3 kids, and they all regularly got together for chaotic family dinners that Tessa treasured. "They are," Tessa agreed, her heart swelling as she watched her husband and daughter spinning across the floor. "We all are." "Do you ever think about that night?" Emily asked. "When you two met?" "All the time," Tessa admitted. "I think about how easily it could have not happened. If Graham had arrived earlier, if I had been sitting somewhere else, if he had not decided to ask me to dance. So many small things that had to align perfectly." "But they did align," Emily said, "because you two were meant to find each other. I believe that." Tessa believed it too. She believed in fate and chance and the magic of being open to possibilities. She believed in the power of a single moment to change everything. And she believed in the love she shared with Graham, a love that had started with a dance and grown into the foundation of her entire life. Graham caught her eye from across the dance floor and winked, and Tessa felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt that first night. Some things never changed. Some feelings never faded. And as she watched him sweep Grace into another spin, both of them laughing, Tessa knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep and they were finally alone in their hotel room, Graham pulled Tessa into his arms. "Dance with me," he said softly. "There is no music. We do not need music. We never did." So they danced in the quiet room, swaying together to a rhythm only they could hear. And Tessa rested her head on Graham's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and thinking about how grateful she was for that first dance, for every dance since, and for all the dances still to come. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Graham replied. "Always have, always will." And in that moment, with her husband's arms around her and their children sleeping safely nearby and a future full of promise stretching out before them, Tessa knew that she had everything she could ever want. She had found her partner, her love, her home. All because a CEO had approached her at a friend's wedding and she had been brave enough to say yes when he asked her to dance. It was a simple choice, really. One dance, but it had changed everything. And she would make that same choice again in a heartbeat, every single time,